right, if you've ever had a transaction just fail, or you've been hit with a chargeback from a big retailer, or maybe a PO shows up with totally wrong product codes, then you're in the right place. This right here is the blueprint you need. We're going to build the definitive guide to EDI data mapping. So let's get into it.
So let's think about this for a second. When an EDI transaction gets bounced back, or you see that dreaded chargeback, or a PO is just plain wrong, what's the first thing we blame? It's super easy to point the finger at the EDI system, right? But the real root cause, the thing that's quietly breaking everything, it's almost always, and I mean almost always, a data mapping problem.
And we're not talking about a small problem here. The scale is just massive. Get this. IBM research figures that a whopping 85% of all supply chain transactions run on EDI. The market itself was worth almost $1.8 billion back in 2022, and it's set to just explode to over $4.5 billion by 2030. So yeah, this is not some niche tech. This is literally the language that modern business is built on.
And this slide really gets to the heart of the issue. You know, every system speaks its own language. Your internal SAP system, it's spitting out documents in its native IDOC format. But your partner over there, they're using Acumatica, and it only gets JSON. It's like one person is speaking German and the other only understands Japanese. Without a translator in the middle, nothing gets done. Communication just breaks down. And that translator, that crucial middle layer, well, that's exactly what EDI mapping is.
Okay, so here's the game plan for today. We're going to start with the basics, the definition. Then we'll link that process to profit. After that, we'll look at different architectures, walk through the 5 key steps to get it done, cover best practices and what to avoid, and wrap up with how to keep it all going and growing for the long haul.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the essential definition. So what exactly are EDI mapping in translation?
So at its core, EDI mapping is just the process of taking data from one format and changing it into another format so that the system on the other end can actually read and understand it. I really like this analogy. Think of it as a technological bridge. It's what connects two totally separate systems that couldn't talk to each other otherwise. It makes that automated communication possible.
And this is a great example of how it actually works. So first, your SAP system kicks out an order in its own IDOC format. Then the mapping layer grabs it, and this is the magic part. It translates every single data field and the whole structure. Finally, it shoots it over to your partner's Acumatica system as a perfectly clean JSON file. And here's the key. It's bilateral. That just means the translation works both ways, for documents coming in and for documents going out.
Now, for this whole thing to work, you and your partner have to agree on a shared language, and that's where EDI standards come in. These are basically the rule books for the data exchange. They spell out exactly what info is needed, in what order, in what format. It ensures that when you send a PO, both systems are on the same page about what price means or where the quantity field is. In North America, you're almost always going to see ANSI X12. Internationally, it's usually UN/EDI fact, and then you've got these industry-specific ones like VDA for German auto or Tradecoms for UK retail.
Okay, moving on to Section 2. Let's connect the dots here, from this technical process to actual business profit. We're moving from the what it is to the why you should care, the real business case for getting your mapping right.
First off, the big one. Data accuracy gets a huge boost. When you automate the exchange and lock in a standard format, you're creating this super consistent, repeatable process. It just works every time. For instance, a map can enforce a rule that a price always has 2 decimal places. Simple, right? But that one rule prevents a ton of incorrect invoices. Plus, it spots weird data anomalies before they can mess things up later on.
Next up, you pretty much get rid of manual errors. I mean, think about it. Every time a person has to type something in, there's a chance for a typo, or flipping a couple of numbers around, or just getting the format wrong. And those little mistakes, they snowball into huge, costly cleanup jobs and compliance headaches. Automated mapping just takes that human error out of the equation completely. And number 3, everything just moves faster. Because the data is exchanged in real time, the whole cycle, from PO to payment, speeds up dramatically. Your purchase orders get processed instantly, which means products ship out sooner, which means you get paid faster. This isn't just about being a little more efficient. This is about being agile. And that is a serious competitive advantage. I mean, this quote really says it all. You can reduce transaction times from weeks down to minutes. It's a complete game changer. What used to be a mountain of paperwork taking days or weeks can now be done literally in the time it takes to grab a cup of coffee. All right, Section 3, choosing your architecture. This is a really big decision you'll have to make when you're setting all this up. So do you go with the direct approach or an indirect one?
So what's the real difference here? Well, direct mapping is pretty straightforward. You build a specific one-to-one map directly between your system and each trading partner. It's a point-to-point connection. On the other hand, indirect or canonical mapping is a bit different. It uses a universal middleman format. Think of it like a hub-and-spoke model. Everything gets translated into this central canonical format first, and then it gets translated to its final destination.
So how do you choose? Well, this chart lays it out pretty clearly. You'll want to go with direct mapping if you've only got a handful of really high-volume partners and your own systems are pretty stable. But if you're dealing with dozens, maybe even hundreds of partners and you're always adding new ones, then canonical is your friend. It's just so much easier to scale. Think about this. Let's say you switch your ERP from SAP to Oracle. With direct mapping, you have to rebuild every single map for every partner. What a nightmare. With canonical, you just change one map, the one connecting Oracle to your central hub. That's it. Okay, let's get practical. Section 4 is all about the 5-step process for actually getting a mapping project off the ground and running.
So, step 1 is all about identifying your business needs. What documents are we exchanging? With who? Between which systems? Then step 2, you gotta analyze the data. And I mean really dig in. Look at every single field in the source and the target to understand what it is and how it's formatted. Step 3, you define the mapping rules. This is the actual blueprint for the translation. Step 4, the system does its thing. It transforms and validates the data based on your rules. And finally, step 5, you test, and test again with real data before you go live.
All right, we've got the process down. Now for Section 5, best practices and pitfalls. This is the really good stuff. How to do it right, and maybe more importantly, what can break it.
Okay, if you want your system to last, these 5 things are non-negotiable. First, stick to standard formats like X12 or EDI Fact. Second, keep a detailed data dictionary. It's your single source of truth for what everything means. Third, use consistent naming conventions internally. It saves so much confusion. Fourth, document everything about your mapping logic. The future you will thank you for it. And finally, and I can't say this enough, always test with real-world data to find problems before your partners do.
So what's the biggest headache you're going to face? It's simple: constant change. Your partners are always updating their systems. You're updating your ERP, and boom, your maps are broken. Seriously, some companies deal with hundreds of map changes a year. The way to survive this is a 3-part plan. First, you need strict version control for all your maps. No guessing what's live. Second, use automated monitoring to keep an eye on your partner's specs. And third, create a rock-solid standard process for implementing and testing every single update. It's all about managing the chaos.
And that brings us to our final section, sustain and scale. The big takeaway here is a shift in mindset. You have to treat EDI as an ongoing process, not a one-and-done project. It's all about the long game. So, what are the secrets to long-term success? Well, there are 3 big ones. First, you've got to actively manage your versions. You need a system to track that partner A is on X12 version 4010, while partner B just moved to 5010. Second, be proactive about errors. Use tools like the 997 functional acknowledgement to get confirmations and set up alerts that tell you about a problem the second it happens. And third, design for scale right from the beginning. Look at cloud-based or API-first options that won't hold you back when your business starts to grow. When you really boil it down, good EDI mapping is so much more than just a technical task. When you do it right, it's a huge strategic asset. It makes you more accurate, it speeds up your entire supply chain, and it makes your partners happy. But when it's done poorly, well, it becomes this constant technical liability that just bleeds time and money through errors and penalties. So I want to leave you with this one question to think about. When you look at your own setup, is your EDI mapping architecture a powerful asset pushing your business forward, or is it a technical liability that's just holding you back?